And hello again from Fox News in Washington. NSA leaker Edward Snowden is on the move today. With the U.S. seeking Snowden's extradition, Hong Kong authorities allowed him to leave the country, reportedly on a flight to Moscow. And Russian news agencies say he's booked on a flight from Moscow to Cuba on Monday. Joining us now to discuss the Snowden case and the split inside the GOP over immigration reform are two leading Republicans. Senator Lindsey Graham is a member of the Gang of Eight that is leading the push for reform. Senator Mike Lee opposes the legislation, and he is the author of a new e-book, Why John Roberts Was Wrong About Health Care. We should also point out both are members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Gentlemen, let's start with Edward Snowden. Senator Graham, what do you make of Hong Kong, Hong Kong authorities allowing Snowden to go? They say that our extradition papers were not in full compliance with their law. And what leverage do we have over Moscow if they decide to let him go to another country?
Well, I'd like to find out why our papers were not in compliance. That would be a big mistake by the Department of Justice. I don't think he's a hero. I believe he hurt our nation. He compromised a national security program designed to find out what terrorists were up to. So the Freedom Trail is not exactly China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela. So I hope we'll chase him to the ends of the earth, bring him to justice, and let the Russians know there will be consequences if they harbor this guy.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because the key decision over the next 24 hours has to be made by Moscow, Senator Graham. Should we put pressure on them right now? Hold them there.
Absolutely. If they want to be part of the world community, the WTO, they want a good relationship with the United States, they should hold this felon and send him back home for justice.
Senator Lee, are we basically helpless here as Ed Snowden thumbs his nose at the United States with the help of the Chinese and now apparently with the help of the Russians? And what if he goes to another country, whether it's Cuba or Iceland or someplace in South America?
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the word helpless, Chris, but we are in a precarious position here. But I think Mr. Snowden is also. Look, I've made no secret about the fact that I've got some concerns about much of what the NSA has been doing. But I think Mr. Snowden is delusional if he thinks that he's going to find a country with a better human rights record in Moscow or in Havana or in Caracas. I think he's in for a rude awakening if that's what he has in mind.
So what does it tell you if Ed Snowden is headed to one of those countries rather than the U.S.?
It tells me that if he's looking for a place with a better human rights record than the United States, he's certainly not going to find it in any of those countries.
All right, gentlemen, let's turn to immigration reform, which is the reason we invited you here in the first place. With the addition of more than $40 billion in new border enforcement, will the Senate this week pass comprehensive immigration reform? And if so, how many votes? Senator Graham, let's start with you.
The bill will pass. I think we're on the verge of getting 70 votes. That is my goal. It has always been my goal. We're very, very close to 70 votes. The Hoeven-Corker amendment, I think, gets us over the top.
And we're going to talk in detail about that in just a moment. But let me ask you for a general prediction. Also, Senator Lee, I know you're opposed to this legislation, but do you agree that it's going to pass with a very wide majority, something like 70 votes?
I think it is likely to pass, and I think it may well be along the margin Senator Graham suggested. And, you know, look, the sponsors of this bill had the best of intentions. In my opinion, the best of intentions aren't enough when you're dealing with a 1,200-page bill. They promised us that under this bill, illegal immigration would be a thing of the past. It won't. CBO told us this week that 10 years from now, we'll still have 6 to 8 million illegal immigrants in this country. They told us that it would be tough but fair, and it's neither. It's not tough on those who have broken the law, and it's not fair to those who've been patiently waiting their turn in line to come to this country legally. And perhaps worst of all, Chris, we learned late Friday, just late Friday, that they're going to replace the entire Gang of Eight bill, about 1,000 pages, with the 1,200-page Corker-Hoeven amendment. This is a provision that very few people have read and even fewer fully understand. So, look, we all want immigration reform, but this bill is not the right vehicle for getting there.
All right. Well, let's talk about this amendment, which has apparently changed the calculus and added 10 to 15 more Republican votes. It's being called the Border Surge Amendment. Let's take a look specifically at what it would do. Double the number of border agents to 40,000. Complete 700 miles of new fencing. deploy drones, radar, and ground sensors, full implementation of E-Verify for employers, and beef up entry-exit tracking for people on visas. Senator Lee, is your problem that you don't think, even with this $40 billion in extra border enforcement, you still don't think it's going to work? Or is your problem the sequencing, the idea that it's going to allow a provisional legal status for the 11 million people, immigrants who are already here, before you get all of this border enforcement in place?
As a proponent of immigration reform, my problem has always been with sequencing and with the fact that it's not a good idea to try to attack the entire problem at once. That's how you end up with a 1,200-page bill. And with the sequencing of this bill in particular, we have to look to the fact that the pathway to citizenship begins basically on day one. But it'll take many, many years, if not decades, to fully implement all these border security measures.
Senator Graham, you say that many of the Republicans who are opposed to talk about border security, they really just don't favor a path to citizenship. But the Congressional Budget Office, and this is something that Senator Lee just pointed out, the Congressional Budget Office said that your Gang of Eight bill would only reduce illegal immigration by 25%.
They're talking about the entry-exit problem. 40% of the people who are here illegally overstayed their visas. There will be improvements in that area. As to the border, we've practically militarized the border. I've been hearing for years, let's secure the border. Let's regain our sovereignty. We have secured our border in a way I could not have imagined 4 or 5 years ago. This whole border security amendment, I think, is the most aggressive attempt to control the southern border and regain our sovereignty. This bill reduces our deficit by $890 billion. It is good for our economy. This bill is good for our national security. No one can get a green card until the border security measures are up and running, until E-Verify is up and running, controlling a job in America. As to the 11 million, they will have an earned, hard pathway to citizenship. They have to get in the back of the line before they can become a citizen. They can't cut in line. They have to pass 2 English proficiency exams. I reject the idea of becoming the Mideast or Europe, where you have 11 million people with a legal status who can't be part of America. America is different than the Mideast and Europe. E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. This is a good solution for our national security, for our economy, and tough, practical solution to 11 million. And most importantly, if we do this bill, amnesty is the status quo. If we do this bill, there will be no third wave of illegal immigration.
Let me ask you about another objection that Senator Lee just mentioned, the idea that this is going to be some huge 1,200-page bill. I heard you complain about that during Obamacare, the idea that you have this huge bill that nobody's read, and why not take it in more incremental bite-sized pieces? Why not in this case?
Well, let's look at it this way. Give the Republicans all the border security you want and all the legal immigration you want, and trust the Republicans to deal fairly with 11 million. That's not going to sell to a Democrat, and I sure as hell not going to accept an agreement where they get legalization on a pathway to citizenship, then they give me border security, then they give me legal immigration reform. You have to do it together. We have tied border security and legal immigration reform to green card status. Until we secure our border, until we get the legal immigration reform in place, you can't get a green card which would put you on citizenship status. We've tied the two together. That's the only way to do this. I've been dealing with it since 2005 and 6, and this is a great solution for our economy and our national security, and I'm very proud of this bill.
Even if the Senate passes immigration reform this week, it still has to go on to the House. And Senator Lee, you have said that it will be dead on arrival in the House. House Republicans are talking about the kind of incremental approach that I know you favor. Let's deal with enforcement first, and after that we can deal with the 11 million illegals who are in this country. Let's take a look at something John Boehner said.
It's border security and confidence that we've got the border secured before we begin to get down this path of addressing both the legal immigration issues and the illegal immigration issues.
But Senator Lee, Lindsey Graham says, and I must say a lot of Democrats say, that'll kill the legislation. They're not going to accept border enforcement first and then a promise of dealing with legalization of the 11 million people who are already here afterwards.
Well, that's what they've said. That's what they want to be the case. The fact is, I think the House of Representatives has it right. In any event, the House of Representatives has said border security first. And they're doing exactly the right thing. They're dealing with this in the right sequence. The House Judiciary Committee passed out of committee this week two security measures, two things to bring about robust immigration reform and a step-by-step process. And I think that's the approach we ought to be taking. What's making this contentious, what's making it politically divisive, is that the Senate Gang of Eight has insisted on wrapping all of these issues up into one 1,200-page bill. That's what's making it divisive, because they're putting the single most controversial, confrontational issue, that of amnesty and ultimate citizenship, into a 1,200-page bill.
All right, gentlemen, we got about 2 minutes left, and I want you to split it evenly, if you will. There's a lot of, needless to say, a lot of politics in all this. President Obama pushed for passage of the Senate bill this week in his weekend media address. Take a look.
That's what comprehensive immigration reform looks like. Stronger enforcement, a smarter legal immigration system, a pathway to earned citizenship, a more vibrant, growing economy that's fairer on the middle class.
Senator Graham, is President Obama doing enough to push this? And if Republicans are seen, whether in the Senate, unlikely, or in the House, much more likely, as stopping this comprehensive immigration reform, what will be the political fallout as the GOP tries to reach out to Hispanic voters?
Well, President Obama's been better on immigration than Senator Obama. Senator Obama started doing the union's bidding and helped take the bill down in 2006 and 2007. Every time we've asked him to do something, he has really come through. But when he does things on his own, even this time around, it's been pretty much a disaster coming out of the White House. As to the Republican Party, here's my firm belief. America's not divided on this, Mike. 70% of Americans, including Republicans, will support an earned pathway to citizenship over a 13-year period where you get in the back of the line, learn a language, and pay a fine. So to the Republican Party, this is a chance to improve our economy, reduce the deficit by $890 billion, to get border security you'll never see in your lifetime, to regain our sovereignty. And if it fails, and we are blamed for its failure, our party is in trouble with Hispanics, not because we're conservative, but because of the rhetoric and the way we've handled this issue. I want to get reattached to the Hispanic community, sell conservatism, pass comprehensive immigration reform, and grow this party. The party's got to be bigger than Utah and South Carolina. The Hispanic community is very close to our values, but we have driven them away over this issue. Let's fix this problem for the good of the country and for the good of the party, and this bill does that, my friend.
Senator Lee, let me pick up on what Senator Graham just said to you. Mitt Romney got only 27% of the Hispanic vote. Back in November, 50,000 new Hispanic citizens reach voting age every month in this country. If your party is seen as killing immigration reform, aren't you going to pay a price for that at the polls for decades to come?
Well, look, if we turn immigration reform into a political football, everyone loses, Chris. We all know that. We've learned that from the past, and we don't want to have to learn that the hard way in the future. What the American people want is they want to make sure that our border's secure, and they want to make sure that we've fixed our legal immigration process, especially before we go legalizing, much less granting citizenship to 11 million people, treating all of them the same, regardless of whether they overstayed visas or crossed in illegally in the first place. We have to remember at the end of the day that CBO told us early this week that this will be bad for wages. It'll be bad for unemployment. This is not the right solution.
Senator Lee, Senator Graham, thank you both. Thanks for joining us today to talk about all this, and we'll watch what the Senate does this week. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.